Number 5 on this list is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You may be familiar with this title because there was actually a movie adaptation that hit the screen super recently. Back in 2019, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark came out in film format. But this movie was based off of a book, and for the longest time, this book was super banned. SCMP says this one stands out on the list because unlike the other banned or challenged books, Scary Stories is not political and it doesn't contain any references to drugs or sex. So why were these collections of horror stories so controversial? Some of the stories could be pretty scary and parents felt that they were inappropriate for their children, which is fair considering these are stories about being buried alive, cannibalism, and way more. But for many people, the real issue was the artwork by Stephen Gammell, an incredibly talented illustrator who no doubt caused nightmares for thousands of children since the book's first publication in 1981. So literally, guys, this book got banned because it was too scary. Think about that for a second. The author literally did too good of a job at making a horror book that people thought no one should read it. If I was the guy who wrote this, then I wouldn't know whether to take that as a compliment or like a criticism, to be honest. The people who banned this thing couldn't hold it down forever though, because at the end of the day, it is some great literature for those who love horror. Number 4 on this list is Fire and Fury. Now, this one I felt like I had to bring up because it happened really recently with the former president of the United States. Skyscape says Wolf's gossipy tell-all describes a dysfunctional presidency perpetually in chaos, zoning in at one point on the day the FBI director James Comey was fired. Comey heard about it on TV. Not all of Wolf's claims are accepted as truth, of course. Trump said he didn't authorize Wolf's White House access and didn't speak to him for the first book. Trump's lawyer Charles Harder sent a cease and desist letter threatening a libel lawsuit in an effort to stop publication. Fire and Fury sold out in its first day of a release as a result. By 2021, Trump was speaking to Wolf for Landslide, Wolf's third book in the trilogy. There were countless scandals during the Trump administration, so I feel like this one was just another notch on the belt. Either way though, the government literally did everything in their power to try and get rid of it and stop us from being able to buy it. The opposite happened though, and because it got so much attention, it flew off the shelves faster than they could print them. Number 3 on this list is Lawn Boy. This story, written by Jonathan Iveson, is one of the most challenged books in America in 2021, and honestly, folks, it really shouldn't be. Esquire says Lawn Boy is the big-hearted story of Mike Munoz, a young Chicano striver working on a landscaping crew in Washington. As Mike fights against the soul-crushing forces of classism and racism to achieve his American dream, he also comes to terms with his sexual identity. Though the novel was written for an adult audience, teens fell in love with Lawn Boy, leading it to be awarded an Alex Prize, an award bestowed by the Young Adult Library Services Association to books written for adults that resonate with teens. Critics slammed the book for the LGBTQ content and sexually explicit material, pointing to a sexual encounter between two young men. Iveson has received hate mail and death threats as a result of campaigns to ban his book, but he remains uncode. When I look at the wealth of great literature that enlightened souls have sought to ban through the ages, how could I feel anything but pride to be listed among them, he wrote. To those who would ban my book and burn me at the stake because they are ashamed of their own past experiences or uncomfortable with any non-binary sexual identifications, I hope you find healing. And literally, guys, shout out Jonathan on that one. When I found out that this book was something that people were trying to ban in literally 2021, it kind of blew my mind. Like, sometimes I think that the world is past stuff like that, and I do want to say that I think most people are. Like in America, 87% of people don't think that books should get banned. So at the very least, regardless of their views on things, they think that there should be a freedom of speech or writing. Either way, the government hasn't actually forbidden you from reading this book. People tried to do that. And I say, you shouldn't listen to them. Number 2 on this list is Animal Farm. So if you wanted to read Animal Farm now, then you probably wouldn't have too hard of a time getting your hands on a copy. But back in the day, this wasn't always the case. In fact, the government for a long time wanted nothing to do with the book. Spyscape says Animal Farm was a target of censors and spies. The satire revolves around farm animals who rebel, hoping to create an equal society. Instead, they end up living under Napoleon, a dictatorial pig. The USSR saw it as a critique of its politics and banned the book. The UAE briefly banned Animal Farm because of its talking pigs seen to be against Islamic values. The CIA, meanwhile, turned it into a propaganda tool and funded an animated movie of the same name, although spies changed the book's ending. If we think about it logically for a second, it makes sense why a government wouldn't want Animal Farm to get read by the general public. This is especially heightened when we think about it from the perspective of a controlling government like the USSR was. In their brain, they probably saw this book as a bit of a threat. The public reads it and then starts getting some sneaky ideas about how they're going to revolt and start their own new country with a totally new government. And then this even goes a step further because the CIA started pushing this book and marketing it as something against the USSR. What was a fictional story turned into this whole political thing caught between the two biggest superpowers in the world when it was released. And number 1 on this list is the Anarchist Cookbook. This book has had a roller coaster of a life since it was written. Big Thing says, since it was first written in 1971, much of its information is out of date. But some topics, like how to make improvised bombs, don't have an expiration date. The book provides instructions for making LSD and tear gas, primers on how to operate various firearms, how to sabotage different kinds of infrastructure, and writing on anarchist philosophy. The book was written by William Powell, a manager of a bookstore in Greenwich Village. Powell quit his job, however, to write the Anarchist Cookbook. My motivation at the time was simple, said Powell in an article for The Guardian. I was being actively pursued by the US military, who seemed single-mindedly determined to send me to fight and possibly die in Vietnam. Its countercultural, violent message proved popular today. It is sold in excess of 2 million copies. It should come as no surprise that the book is infamous and controversial, but the kinds of criticism it attracts varies depending on the source. Governments across the world clearly have a negative opinion of the book. It does, after all, advocate for violent civil disobedience. The Anarchist Cookbook is banned in Australia. In the UK, possessing the book, though not illegal itself, has often been used as evidence in terrorism cases. A teenager was accused of and later acquitted of a plot to assassinate British National Party members in 2008. In 2017, a 27-year-old who had traveled to Syria and possessed a copy was accused of being a terrorist. It turned out that he had merely printed a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook for use in a role-playing game in a university society. So clearly the government does not like this book at all. I think it's a bit much for people to be accused of certain things just by owning the book, but I also kind of see why it happens based on the contents of the text. Just be aware that if you pick this book up, then the government may start keeping tabs on you. Number 5 on this list is Shems al-Marif. This book, from my findings, is not inherently evil in its teachings, but is one of those examples of potentially being a bit too much power for one person to possess. It's a 13th century Arabic grimoire written by Ahmed al-Buni. The book attempts to teach its readers how to perform ancient Arabic magic and is very spiritualistic. This book was super influential in Arabic culture and gained a large following. Many good things have come from this book, but also when you have a large amount of people following anything, some take it too far. Wikipedia writes, in contemporary form, the book consists of 2 volumes, Shems al-Marif al-Kubra and Shems al-Marif al-Sugra, the former being the larger of the 2. The first few chapters introduce the reader to magic squares and the combination of numbers and the alphabet that are believed to bring magical effect, which the author insists is the only way to communicate with jinn, angels, and spirits. And that right there is one of the main teachings in this book, the ability to talk to spirits. The amount of scary stories that we've talked about on this channel though, in regards to people trying to communicate with the dead is crazy, and it shows just how often things like this can go wrong. This has obviously happened many a time with this book, and those trying to reach their departed loved one end up contacting a super dangerous demon. I don't think that there's anything morally wrong with contacting the dead, if the dead are okay with it of course, but it seems like doing this always ends up with something bad happening. This grimoire won't curse you just by simply reading it, but if you try and perform some of the rituals it suggests, then it's very likely that you could cause some serious harm to you or those that you love. I recommend just avoiding this book altogether. Number 4 on this list is Devarmi Mystery. Now the book in question here is actually a fictional book, and therefore it would be actually impossible for you to read it anyways, even if you wanted to for some reason. But that being said, it doesn't change the fact that it's definitely cursed and extremely evil. If this book was real, then we would need to get rid of it as soon as possible because it teaches humans how to do some very dangerous things. The book is part of the Lovecraftian universe and made its first appearance in The Secret of the Tomb. The book isn't referenced too much in that story, but it's described in pretty good detail in the story The Black Bargain. In that book, it describes Devarmi Mystery as something that told you how you could compound aconite and belladonna and draw circles of phosphorescent fire on the floor when the stars were right. Something that spoke of melting tallow candles and blending them with corpse fat, whispered of the uses to which animal sacrifices might be put. It spoke of meetings that could be arranged with various parties most people don't even believe in, with cold, deliberate directions for traffic with ancient evil. Drawing circles of fire, sacrificing animals, talking with ancient evil, this all sounds like pretty bad news to me. Especially the part that says you can arrange meetings with various parties. It's clear that not only can this book teach someone how to perform any number of spells and incantations, but some of those spells will deal with the summoning of ancient demons and creatures. And if we assume that this book is real and can be read, then that would also mean that the terrifyingly powerful gods Lovecraft wrote about would also be real. Meaning that this book could grant you the ability to summon Cthulhu or something even worse. Summoning your standard demon is already bad enough, but an all-knowing, super powerful god definitely raises the stakes a little bit. This book, from every description I can read about, sounds like something that's just far too dangerous for any human to use and wield safely. If it ever was real and you did happen to stumble upon it, best to avoid reading it at all costs. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Abramelin. Abraham was an Egyptian mage who lived between 1362 and 1458 and dedicated his life to magic. Once Abraham visited Egypt, and there he met a magician, not that magician which you see on TV shows, but that who really knows dark magic and dark secrets. He told Abraham many dark and mysterious secrets and strange things which you and I can never imagine. He told him how to live with the dead person, the location of under-earth treasures, how to contact devils. Besides this, he also told him the secrets of becoming invisible and flying in the sky. That last passage that I just read was written by Sharik Kamal while he was listing the most cursed books of all time. This book is known to be dangerous, and it isn't just because of the contents in it either. Yes, summoning the dead and performing dark magic in its own right is very dangerous and has the potential to cause serious problems for you and those around you. This book, though, may just be inherently cursed to begin with. Many people who have read this book, even those who don't go on to perform any of the rituals or incantations that the book describes, have gotten horribly bad luck afterwards. Like the second they opened up the book and started reading, their entire life just flipped on its side. Some have said that afterwards their home became haunted by some dark spirit and they had to move. It's almost as if the book itself is a portal to another demonic dimension, and just the action of opening it could cause something to leak out. I'm sure that Abraham was a great writer, but no book is worth dying over, so I won't be reading this one anytime soon. Number 2 on this list is the Great Omar. This book is believed to be the cause of one of the most tragic disasters in all of human history, sinking the unsinkable ship, the Titanic. No, you don't catch Leonardo DiCaprio reading this book in the 1997 movie version, but maybe he should have. This book, even though it is deeply cursed, is potentially the most ornate and beautiful books to have ever been created. In fact, it took over 2,500 hours to create this book, which translates to over 100 full days. One would think that a book of this kind would fetch quite the pretty penny, but that actually wasn't the case. In fact, the man who binded this book, Francis Sangorski, had an extremely hard time trying to sell it to anyone. Finally, he did find a home for it in America and was in the process of sending it over there, but it never reached its destination though, because it was on the Titanic. Now, the reason that people think this book had something to do with the unsinkable ship sinking is because only a week or so after the ship had gone down, so did Sangorski. He died by drowning to death a very short time after the book had also sunk to the bottom of the ocean. This is why people believe that something about this book will curse those around it and potentially lead to someone drowning. I personally think it's a bit of a stretch to just assume that having this book caused the entire Titanic to sink. However, it is a remarkable coincidence what happened to Sangorski. It probably won't ever happen, but if this book ever did wash ashore one day, I wouldn't want to be the one to pick it up first. Number 1 on this list is the Book of Soyga. The Book of Soyga is one of the most complete collections of magic and dark magic that one could come across. Wikipedia writes, amongst the incantations and instructions on magic, astrology, demonology, lists of conjunctions, lunar mansions, and names of genealogies of angels, the book contains 36 large squares of letters which Dee was unable to decipher. Otherwise unknown medieval magical treatises are cited, including works known as the Liber E, Liber Os, Liber Dignus, Liber Sipil, and Liber Munob. So we'll get to those letters in a second because those play into the cursed nature of this book, but even without those, we're still dealing with a book that goes into depth on some pretty dangerous topics. The one that jumps off the page to me as being potentially problematic is demonology, the study of demons and the hierarchy to them, and also the study of how to potentially summon them. This is certainly problematic and already a reason to not read this book, but let's get back to those letters. In 1608, there lived a man named John Dee. John Dee was fascinated with this book and wanted to figure out how to decode the letters. He reached out to the angel Uriel, and Uriel told him that only the worthy one will be able to crack the code. Truly a chosen one scenario where the book will reveal its secrets to the one that it decides. John Dee tried to decode it anyways, but then a grim fate befell him and he died. Then, very mysteriously, the book disappeared from the face of the earth for almost 400 years, until it all of a sudden reappeared in 1994. Now, it's thought that trying to decode these letters could prove fatal if you aren't the one worthy to do so. There's over 7 billion people on the planet, so the odds that you're the one worthy one and won't die are pretty slim. Not the sort of odds that I'd want to take just to look at some strange medieval letters.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a cursed grimoire that is said to contain summoning spells for over 72 demons. That's right, this book can help you summon 72 demons. And no one knows who wrote it. What we do know is that this book contains a bunch of compiled texts from the 17th century. Some of these texts tell the reader how to conjure spirits or demons, and then it tells you how to control these entities that you summon. No matter how cool you may think that is, you don't ever want to own this book. This book is apparently so cursed that anyone who keeps a copy of it will die or experience constant bad luck. One person who owned a copy of this book reported the book's pages turning on its own. Another time, the book violently flew across the room at them. They also heard strange whispers coming from the book, and on a number of occasions have seen shadow people. The only way to end this curse is to burn all the pages in the book and then get rid of all the ashes. Seems like a lot of work, so maybe just don't go out seeking copies of it. Although we don't know who wrote the book, legend has it that King Solomon originally wrote it for his son. He then asked him to bury it with him in his grave. But apparently when he was getting prepared for burial, a group of Babylonian philosophers found the book, and one of them got a vision from an angel. The angel told him to hide the book from the unworthy. So he decided to cast a spell on it to keep it from getting into the wrong hands. And that's how the book got its curse. But for some reason, copies of the book can be found on the internet. So if you want to tempt your fate, check it out. But seriously, actually maybe don't. Like, all we need this year are demons taking over the world because some Dumbo tried to summon them. In our 4th spot today, we have the Grand Grimoire. Otherwise known as the Gospel of Satan, this book has been named one of the most terrifying occult books in history. So it was apparently written in the 16th century by a man that was possessed by the devil. Yeah, you heard me correctly. The book is filled with instructions on how to summon demons or raise spirits from the dead. Reading this book and following any of the spells is said to be equivalent to selling your soul to the devil, which is why the original book is kept locked away somewhere in the Vatican's secret archives. They don't want anyone messing around with this book, but you can find versions of this book online and for sale, but it won't be the original cursed text. Either way, I'm not risking it. Coming in our third spot, we have the Book of Sacred Magic. Back in the 15th century, a mage named Abra Melin decided to gift his son with a book filled with mythical curses. I doubt it was on his son's wish list, but hey, it's the thought that counts, right? Anyways, in the 1900s, the book was translated to English, and that's when people realized it was probably cursed. Why? Well, throughout the book, it talked about rituals on how to control your demons. Abra believed that every person had their own demon, not just a metaphorical one, but a literal one. This book taught you on how to control your demon. It also talked about how to perform other supernatural acts. In the end, it was believed that whoever owns a copy will be haunted by spirits, and bad luck will befall on them. In fact, a number of people have reported bad luck and hauntings after reading this book. So it seriously isn't worth it. Like, I'm not getting cursed. No, thank you. Coming in at number 2, we have the Book of Soyga, otherwise known as the book that kills. So I suggest you don't put it on your reading list. Basically, this book was created in the 16th century and is a Latin essay all about demonology. To this day, we still don't know who wrote it. But what we do know is that John Dee, who worked as an advisor for Elizabeth I, got the book in 1580. He spent the rest of his life trying to decipher the whole thing. He quickly realized that this book was no good. It talked about how to conjure demons and had a list of spells and stuff like that. Rumor has it that one section of the book he could not decipher at all. It was a page with tables filled with random Latin letters. But he was determined to decipher it. So him and his pal, who was an occultist and medium, apparently summoned the archangel Uriel. The angel apparently spoke through his friend and said that this book was made when Adam entered paradise. And also, apparently only Archangel Michael is the only one who can decipher the full book. The angel also warned them that the book was cursed, and anyone who deciphers the meaning of the coded tables would die 2.5 years later. Well, in the end, this book drove John to madness, and he died. After his death, the book was lost for the longest time, until 1994. That's when not one, but 2 copies were found. Crazy. But let me know in the comments below, if you had the opportunity, would you risk your life deciphering this book? I'm a little curious to see what it's about, but also I don't want to die, so maybe not. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Devil's Bible. The Devil's Bible, otherwise known as the Codex Gigas, is this massive 310-page book said to harness evil and negative energy. It was discovered in 1648 when a Swedish army looted the city of Prague. During this time, they discovered this book, which is considered the largest medieval book in the world. Like I said, it was composed of 310 pages, but it is also 36 inches tall, 20 inches wide, 8.7 inches thick, and weighs 165 pounds. In fact, the book did contain 320 pages at one point, but the last 10 pages were cut out and removed. More on this later, stay tuned. So now, there's this really creepy legend surrounding this book. Legend goes that the book was written by a monk, but this monk broke his spiritual vows, and he was sentenced to be sealed behind a brick wall and left to die. The night before his death, he realized he would not be able to finish his book, so he summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete it for him. In return, he offered him his soul. So legend goes that this book was finished by the devil himself. Now, remember those pages that I said were removed? Well, apparently they were removed for a very important reason. Some people believe that those pages told people how to summon the devil. And obviously, if those pages fell into the wrong hands, it would be bad. To make this book even creepier, some pages are filled with drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. One page contains a 19-inch frightening drawing of Satan. And apparently, the book also contains a bunch of dark rituals and tests, like how to perform exorcisms. You know, in case you summon the devil or a demon, then you just want to take it all back again.
Coming in at number 5, we have White is for Witching by Helen Oyemi. A ghost, vampire, haunted house story all in one. That's exactly what you get from Helen Oyemi and her novel White is for Witching, which was published back in 2009. The novel takes place on the cliffs near Dover, in a mysterious house where the Silver family resides. However, there is no peace in the home as the family is reeling from the loss of Lily, with her twins Miranda and Elliot and her husband all mourning the absence in very few words. However, it isn't just loss that is present within the home. There is a quiet rumbling, something festering, bending the minds of not just the readers but also the characters. Not to mention something is going on with Miranda, who has developed an eating disorder for non-edible items, descending into depression and suffering a complete mental break. At the home, however, it has become clear that the house has a personality of its own, attacking guests and terrifying its occupants. The book, more importantly, is a social commentary about xenophobia and acceptance, with the house turning on Miranda's girlfriend who is black, and the ghosts within its walls exhibiting violent tendencies. Miranda must not only fight her inner demons, but also the demons that plague her home. It is truly a unique story, and an important one at that. What's even more unique about the novel is that it takes on many perspectives, including the house itself. If you haven't yet, definitely check this one out immediately. You will not be disappointed. Before we jump into number 4, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps out a lot in the YouTube algorithm. Coming in at number 4, we have Broken Monsters by Lauren Bukes. One of 2 detective novels on our list, Broken Monsters was written by Lauren Bukes and published back in 2014. The story itself follows Detective Gabriella Versado, who works in Detroit's inner city, and as you would expect, she's seen her fair share of fatalities and bodies. However, there is a new case that is different from the rest, a half-boy, half-deer fused together. Yet this would prove to be the first of many, with more peculiar and more disturbing bodies being discovered across the city, with reality appearing to be tearing at the seams in this mind-bending body horror. No one is safe. Who is next? Versado's daughter is flirting with a potential predator online, while the local freelance journalist Jono is doing absolutely anything to get an exclusive on the case. But if you're Thomas Kane, you are simply trying to protect your homeless family. All these stories intertwine as detectives attempt to find the monster who is seemingly set on remaking the world as its own creation, a disturbing and violent creation at that. The novel is entrancing and near impossible to put down, with Bukes' style of writing drawing you deeper and deeper and deeper into the book with each turn of the page. Not to mention the horror is crippling, with every word etching a place in your mind. This isn't a story you forget quickly, with it being violent, frightening, and incredibly clever. Coming in at number 3, we have Last Days by Brian Evanson. I think it's safe to say that we love anything cult related here on Top 5, and Last Days falls right into that category. Written by Brian Evanson and published back in 2009, Last Days is a mystery horror that follows a detective, Klein, who is kidnapped by a religious cult who believes that amputations bring you closer to God, which is baffling. The detective is there to attempt to uncover who the cult leader is and bring an end to the madness. However, in order to stop it all, will he have to sacrifice something to solve the mystery, and how far is he exactly willing to go? Last Days is incredibly intense and profoundly unsettling, with it feeling like a tumbling down the rabbit hole thriller mixed with something far more sinister. The novel is the perfect blend of body horror and psychological horror, with a dash of black comedy in there as well, with the novel even going on to win the best horror novel of 2009. It is oddly disturbing yet also delightful, and while the experience of reading it might not be the most enjoyable, it is certainly an experience nonetheless. I mean, when you put cults and mutilation together, you're never going to get something all that pleasant, that's for sure. But if you want the feel of David Lynch meets David Cronenberg on paper, then certainly give Last Days a shot. Coming in at number 2, we have Dark Corners by Ruth Rendell. The final novel by Ruth Rendell before her death, Dark Corners is one that explores the themes of writer's block. And despite being a psychological crime fiction novel, the book is truly terrifying, digging right under your skin and making you feel all kinds of claustrophobic. The story itself follows protagonist Carl Martin. He's not necessarily likable, with him making many mistakes that lead to key moments in the story. One of the major mistakes he makes is renting out the upstairs apartment to a man named Dermot. He seems nice at first, but all is not well. Dermot blackmails Carl, begins to manipulate him, and turns his life upside down and inside out. Now, what makes the story so damn terrifying is the simple fact that the villain is human. A neighbor, a seemingly nice neighbor at that. It creates an element of authenticity. It feels like this could happen to any one of us, because the harsh truth is you never know what people's true intentions are. You never know who on the surface might seem sweet and genuine, but behind closed doors is a raging psychopath. Not to mention there is nothing supernatural about the villain in this novel. He is human through and through, just as evil as they come, thus bringing terror to everyday life. How can Carl escape it? What master plan will he have to come up with to survive? This is a novel that is certainly worth a read this summer. Go check it out. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Maynards House by Herman Raucher. I can guarantee after learning about Maynards House, you'll all be heading onto Amazon or into your nearest retailer to purchase a copy. And trust me when I say you will not be disappointed. First published back in 1981, Maynards House is a horror novel written by Herman Raucher and tells the story of a young Vietnam War veteran named Austin who is suffering from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. He learns that his best friend Maynard has been killed in combat, and to Austin's surprise, Maynard left him his home, a historical site in which a woman was once accused of witchcraft and ultimately killed around the Salem witch trials era. So Austin heads to the home located deep in the woods of northern Maine, and is initially enthralled by the home. However, mysterious events begin to take place in the house, and the snow outside begins to pile up, trapping Austin inside of the home with whatever is lurking there within. Now, the entire novel is a commentary on the effects of war, with Austin having to come to terms with the trauma he experienced in combat, with his sanity deteriorating and himself becoming more and more paranoid of the home, and what is residing in it with him. Is it the witch that the locals so often speak about, or is it something else, something from within his own mind? The novel also touches on the themes of loss, with Austin being forced to deal with the grief of losing his best friend in war, as well as the traumatic events he experienced in his own life. The book is certainly heavy, but it is a truly effective haunted house story that will linger with you long after you put it down.